Embrace the spirit of adventure as you join us on this daring journey through the untamed wilderness of Diego the Podcaster's bonus Overdrive Wednesday. Real people, real stories, really on Wednesday. Available now on YouTube Music.
Warning. The following program may contain material not be suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
They say for every light in this world, there is a shadow waiting to reclaim it. We've been told what to believe, what to fear, and exactly where the boundaries of real end. But tonight, we're crossing those lines. From the whispers in the attic to the lights in the desert sky, and the entities that walk among us, we are stepping behind the veil. Transmitting from deep within the mountains of West Virginia, it's time to seek the truth. This is Let's Find Out with Diego. And now, here is your host, Diego the Podcaster.
On this episode of Let's Find Out, history tells us that the Appalachian Mountains are some of the oldest on Earth. And if you listen to the folks who live in the hollows and coal camps, they'll tell you those mountains have a long memory. Today we're joined by an author who didn't just study these legends, he lived them. Born in Harlan County, Kentucky, and raised in an old coal camp known simply as the camp. He grew up on these stories, and now he's here to talk about his collection of 12 short stories based on true events from his life and the people of Fourmile. All this plus more. Please welcome the author of Whispers in the Mountain, Curtis Josh Rogers. Curtis, my friend, welcome to Let's Find Out.
Thank you.
Yeah, man, I'm happy to be here. I think we've been talking now for a couple of months now, right before getting you on the show, going back and forth, trading information, not only about your book and your horror channel on YouTube, which we'll definitely talk about later on the show, but we have a good friend in common and Thomas Markham of Zombie Media, because he's also our publisher. So I'd like to thank him for getting us together. But let me ask you this question. How did you meet Thomas?
Gosh, it was I don't know, probably 30 years ago when he had the video store in Pineville. It was a long time ago. I was young. Him and his wife had the Bell, I think it's called Bell Video. And he was friends with my cousin, and I just met him back years and years ago.
Now, back then, this must have been, you talk about 30 years ago. I remember the video stores very well, and I'm just learning something new about Thomas. I didn't know he had a video store. That's kind of cool. And did you guys talk about things back then, like Bigfoot or cryptids?
No, not much. It was just, he was more so friends with my cousin, and I was just kind of there. I've had Thomas on my Facebook for a while, and followed a bunch of his stuff and watched his documentaries, and I can't really remember. He had posted something, and I told him the story about one of my stories, and he's like, "Man, that would make a good short story." And then he was like, "Give me like 10 or 12 more of those, and we'll do a book." So I kind of started from there.
And the book wound up being Whispers in the Mountain, which goes over your time growing up and your experiences in coal country. And let's start with this, because now this is your first book, correct?
Yes.
And it dives into your experiences, as I said earlier, living in coal country. How long did you live in that area?
Let's see. Well, from the time I was born, my grandmother raised me from the time I was like 3 weeks old. And we lived in the camp in Fourmile until I was probably 10, somewhere in that area. So we lived right in the thick of it for a long time.
And when you say the camp, somebody grew up on my side of the world, or probably anybody else who doesn't have experience living in towns like that, it already sounds kind of eerie in a way, because sometimes there's been a lot of books that I've talked to people in coal country where folklore comes to life. People have experiences. If it's not what crypt is, it's paranormal. But for those who have no experience or know much about coal country, can you describe the atmosphere of that area?
Uh, from what I remember, it was always kind of really dreary, and at the pitch of dark, you always got in the house because all kinds of crazy stuff always happened. Something was coming out of the woods or noises, or you knew to get in when it got right at dark.
No, the reason I laugh is because nothing good happens when the lights go out when it gets dark. And
Yeah.
I was reading information about the book. These are 12 stories, 12 real deal things in your life. Now, is Fourmile still there?
Yeah. It's the camp's still there, but they came in and bulldozed over it all. I guess getting the rest of the coal out of it, or whatever they can get out of it. But the camp is kind of sort of still there.
So they kind of just shut down the whole the plant there to sort of say, was it for environmental issues, or they got all the coal they can out of there?
Yeah, it has been shut down for years. Before I was born. It was the old Bell County. God, I can't even remember the name of the coal company, but it was where they had that really bad explosion back in like the 60s or 70s or whenever it was. Uh, Gosh, I can't even remember all the information on it. But they'd shut it down for years, and then we just lived up there in the camp part, like where the old monastery building and all this other buildings was. They just moved a bunch of trailers up there, and that's where we lived, on right off Slate Hills, you know. And it was just like it was the old camp from where the old coal mines was. These guys, from what I understand, they would just walk up to work, because they just lived right below the hill, you know. So it had been shut down for years. Huh?
It's a pretty easy commute, just walk to work, but there's are long days, backbreaking work. I don't envy them, that I really respect the work that they did, because that's very dangerous work. And
Yeah.
during your time growing up there, you heard a lot of stories. Later down
Yes.
the road, you wrote those stories down, but let's get into it, because as the bio says, you mentioned that you were raised by your grandmother
Yes.
as being the primary storyteller in your life. Now, what kind of stuff was she telling you? From stuff from her time, her experiences, or was it
Yeah,
more?
it kind of bled over. She would tell me stories, and when I was a kid, I always thought she was just telling me that to get me in the house, to scare me to go to sleep, or whatever it was, until you start seeing stuff on your own, or experiencing all that wild stuff, and then it hits you. The reality hits you of it being real, you know, and like it just floods back, all this stuff that's happened, and if I didn't see it for myself, I would have never believed it,
Amazing.
every
Now,
bit of it.
with seeing these things yourself and your grandmother's stories, if you were to go back, does your family have a history with these types of experiences?
Uh, well, they say my grandmother was born with a white veil over her face. That's like the like a extra the birthing skin was over her face when she was born, so she could see spirits and ghosts and things like that, and heal people with breathing on them. And they always called them Appalachian witches. Is what I've always heard them called, granny women. And so she could always see stuff like that, whether we could or not. So I think she's seen a lot more than what she told me, for sure.
Now, this is
You
the
know,
first time
She'd lived
no,
up there in that camp her whole life, you know.
and I'm sorry that I interrupt you. Now,
Oh,
this is
it's
the
all right.
first time where I heard, what was it? Were they the granny women?
Granny women. Yeah, that's what I've always heard them called. They're like special. I don't know how to explain it. It's like they can see visions. I remember her, if she seen a vision on somebody and she didn't tell them about it, she would get sick as a dog. And it would come back on her. You know. I've seen her cure nosebleeds, earaches. She could take a puff of a cigarette and blow it in somebody's ear and then never get an earache again. You know, take it and catch blood in her hand from a nosebleed and spit in it and wipe it off with a dish rag, and they'd never get a nosebleed again.
Now, is this something common in the area, or was this your grandmother you seen do this?
She's the only one I've ever seen do it. But, I've read about other people having it. I've seen a bunch on TikTok talking about it, and I was like, wow, that's what Mom was. Which that's what I call her because she raised me. I was like, wow, that's what she was, Special
Yeah.
woman.
Oh, absolutely. Now, have you seen this done since by anybody else?
Nope. No.
Yeah. I mean, and that tells me
She was the
something
last
right
one.
there.
Yeah.
Now, this was where we're at about when you were a very young man. Let's talk about when you decided to write down these stories. And let's talk about that. When did you finally decide to write these stories down?
When Thomas mentioned it, it was something he'd posted something or some about folklore stories or something like that, and I was telling him about the children on the train that we saw that night, and he's like, "Oh wow, that's really good. Can you do more of those, or do you know more of those?" And I did a few, and he's like, "You think you can get me about 10 or 12 of them? We can do you a book." And I'd always been wanting to write a book, but never thought I was smart enough to do it. And he kind of encouraged me right into it.
Yeah, I didn't think I'd be able to do it either. And I might have been about 10 or 12 stories myself about my experiences, but it's probably one of the most, I'm gonna say, terrifying. It's the best things that I've ever done because once you write it and it's out there in the world, it's almost like, oh,
Yeah.
now people know these things. But wait, let me go back there. You mentioned something about children on a train.
Yes.
What did you see? Who and where was this at?
So I was probably like 11 or 12-year-old, maybe 13-year-old. And it was down where the old Fourmile post office used to be. I had an aunt that lived across the railroad tracks there. And we were all just sitting around one summer night on the front porch. We would always just hang out like that until 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, just sitting around talking. And so we hear this train coming, and it didn't sound like a normal train. It was, I don't know, it was quieter, but it felt louder. And it took it forever to get to us. Like you could hear it like it was close to you, but it took forever. So when it gets up there, it had about, I don't know, 10 to 13 full loads of coal on like regular train carts. Well, the last 2 or 3 carts looked really old, like they came back like from the 40s. And then as it went by, we seen these 2 little kids, little boy and a little girl, standing on the back of that train. And this is like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning and no moon out, but we seen them like it was broad daylight outside. And you could just see them. They just looked just like they looked plumb through you. And they had old clothes on. Looked like it was like 30s or 40s. And so they go by, and my aunt jumps up. She's like, "Oh my God, there were kids on this train." So every one of us, there's probably like 7 or 8 of us on this porch seeing the same thing. So she jumps up and calls the state police. And they had stopped this train in between Walls End and Newtown, like almost in Pineville. and searched that train down, and they had walked that whole railroad track all the way back to Fourmile looking for these kids and never did find nothing. But they were definitely 100% on that train.
The best part about that is that it wasn't just one person who saw this, it was multiple people.
Yes. Yeah, every one of them saw the same thing.
And this is something that wasn't a one-off here and there. We're talking about multiple times per week, right? This is normal occurrences in this area, right?
Yeah.
And why do you think that is? What is going on in that area that perhaps is so active with, I would say, these spirits or these events?
I'm not really sure. Like, I hadn't even known nothing about it, but I was sending my stories to a friend of mine, and she had said, "Do you think that was part of that orphan train?" And I was like, "What in the world is an orphan train?" So there was this train. I don't think it ever stopped here, but it was back in the 30s and 40s, would take these kids to these different areas or pick up kids from different areas and take them to other areas, and these people would adopt these kids off, either as their kids or as slaves, to work on their farms and all this other stuff. Like, they were just passing these kids off like they were cattle. Like, I didn't even know nothing about that, and I started reading about it, and I was like, wow, that might have been it. Maybe those kids was part of that train or something. But it's called an orphan train. I had never even heard of that.
This is the first time I've heard of that myself. Now, I've heard stories about ghost trains, but also, I'm just now learning about this type of thing where people either dropping off and picking up kids for labor or anything like that. That is terrible.
Yeah. It was awful back then, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of things were awful back then, man. That's why we have a lot of haunted locations. If it's not an asylum, a hospital, or I mean, even coal mines have also been known to be haunted as well. So once you moved out of that area, as you got older, were you still having any types of experiences?
Not so much. Like, catch a few shadows out of the corner of your eye, you know, or like, just little stuff, but it wasn't nothing like it was in Fourmile at all.
When's the last time you've been down there?
Oh, it's been a few years ago. Me and my wife went down there, went into the camp, and they was up there with the big bulldozers and stuff, leveling it all down. As scary as that place was, I'd move back up there in a heartbeat if I could.
Even with all that activity going on?
Yes. Yeah, I like the quietness. Not quiet, but it is quiet. It's quiet from humans.
Well, now are there going to be any homes there still? Are they building anything
No,
in that area?
they plowed everything down. It's just be level area. Looks like by the time they get done.
And that's kind of sad in a way because they're almost just burying the history of that town because I'm sure there's so many stories there that can be told. Now, do you have pictures of that area anywhere?
No. I mean, I don't even know if I could even dig up old pictures of it. I might be able to dig around and find some old ones, maybe. I know I have a few older pictures, but I don't know if it'd be necessarily up there. I'd like to have, though, especially that Big Ten building. There used to be a Big Ten building up there. They called it the commissary building. And back when the coal mines was up there, it was like their store. But it was like they broke it down into 3 different apartments, and I had an aunt and grandmother that lived there in those 3 apartments. And I remember being in those apartments one night, and these things were like probably the top window, to the kitchen there was probably 20 or 30 feet off the ground, because it was up high, big tin building. And I remember us being in there and something was up in that window looking at us, looking through. And there ain't no way a body could be up that high, peeking through a window, it was just like little stuff like that too. You know, little cold chills. You know, when you walk into a room, or it feels like something grabs you by the leg. You know, or laying in
I've
the
had
bed, feel something grab you by the feet.
I've had that experience too. It's pretty interesting waking up to something like pulling your blanket or touching your feet. Like, oh my god,
Yeah,
and not something I really care to experience, but I don't really have a choice. It just happens, right? You know they're gonna do what it is they're gonna do, and with these 12 stories, can you give us a glimpse about some of the things you talk about there? Because you just mentioned something looking through the window. It was kind of high up there. Now, let me go back to that. Do you think it was more of a spirit? Could have been more of like a cryptid. I'm gonna say like a Bigfoot or a dog man or something peeking through that window.
I think it's probably like more of a spirit. It was more like a. We always called it and said it looked like it had a jug on its head, like a milk jug head. You know, it's kind of the way it looked. You know, real plasticky, weird looking. You know, but it glowed. You know, like you could see it plain. That was something that I always remember. You know, it'd be pitch dark. You know, up in that camp, we didn't have no street lights or nothing like that. You know, it'd be pitch dark. You can see these things like it's broad daylight outside.
That's amazing, and this is something that happens quite often. I'm guessing that the area, the community, was kind of already used to it. Like it was
Yeah.
nothing, no big surprise. They weren't even. Were they even scared of this?
I don't think none of the older ones wasn't for sure, but us younger ones was. But now that I can sit down and think about it, you know, it wasn't nothing really that necessarily ever hurt us. You know, but it was definitely scary.
And after you moved out of the area, we talked about if a lot of activity has happened since then. You said not really that much, but now, all these years later, you move somewhere else. Has any of these things followed you to your new home or your current place where you live?
Uh, no, I mean, like I said, I still see kind of shadows. Uh, well, the big old figures. Sometimes out of the corner of your eye or something. But not like it was up there. It's always, you know, like a honey den up there. You know, I don't think I've ever been to a place that's been that haunted, or I don't even know if you even call it haunted. I don't even know what you even call it, because it was like a variety of all kinds of different things.
You know,
You know,
and
it's like you have these fairy tales, and every one of them was right there in this one area. You know,
must be some portal of passageway through there. Now, I will apologize. I did kind of flub the question, but I'll ask it differently because that's my fault. When I said about these things following you home and you might have seen a shadow figure here and there, out of the ones that you've seen, that were any of them look familiar like they did back then? We're talking about like the jughead. Did you see a jughead, or these are different types of shadows compared to Fourmile?
uh, yeah, the Fourmile ones were more detailed. Like you could tell more stuff about those, versus like these are just like passing shadows. You know, it's not as detailed. It's just like, you know, catch a glimpse of something.
I mean, in a way, I think for you, I don't think you mind it when it happened to you almost daily or weekly. Now it's kind of things are a little bit boring compared to how it was back then.
Yeah, I kind of wish it would happen more.
Whoa, whoa, be careful what you wish for. You might just get that. And
It'd give me
but
it'd give me more material to write about.
oh no, there's always material. But yeah, I think that it'd be a book 2 and 3, and more stories will pop out of there. So, out of all those stories that you have in your book, all 12 of them, is there one that stands out the most to you?
Probably those kids on the train, because there were so many people that seen the same thing, and it every detail of that thing has stuck in my head all these years, for 30 years, 35 years. You know,
And after
That's
you,
probably the most one. Yeah.
well, the kids in the train, it already sounds, I want to say the word scary, but that is so intriguing. I think because, for me at least, because there were so many people that saw this, that there's definitely something to that. So after you wrote these 12 stories, you got them off your chest, it got published through Zombie Media. Did any more memories come flooding back to you after you wrote them?
Of the stories themselves,
Well, you wrote the
or like
12.
different stories.
Well, different stories. As you wrote those 12, you got them out there. And as soon as it got published, your memory bank started clearing up. It's like, oh, this happened too. Have you written anything else down?
No, I've written a few. I'm starting to write like a few folklore fiction horror movie or horror type stories. Like I took that Children on the Train one and I stretched it and made it like a fictional folklore horror. Like I wanted to go back and try to create what happened before that train. Like that whole orphan train thing.
Right.
I wanted to do the origins. I wanted to do something that happened, that might have happened to those kids, and like 3 or 4 books, that led up to what we saw, you know.
And I think that's,
But
going to be pretty important stories to tell because now you're going to put a spotlight on that time in history and people will be very interested in learning more about it and then learning what happened then and then the possibility that maybe some of these children may not have escaped the train or that land and they might be stuck there somehow. Hopefully they'll
yeah,
find a way to get out, of course. And you're talking about horror because the last few weeks you've been sharing some of your reels with me, and I know that you have some stuff on your YouTube channel. Well, let's talk about that. When did you start the horror movie vault?
uh, I don't know. It's probably about, I don't know, 6 or 8 months ago, maybe. Uh, I was just didn't have much to do, you know, and I've always been intrigued with horror movies. And I was like, man, what if somebody took every horror movie that came out from the 19 whatever 20s and just made like fan based uh, trailers for them all. So I've amassed this thousands of titles, decade by decade, that I've been working on to just do these fan trailers, just to bring have people go back and watch them, all the old ones, because I love the old horror movie stuff. Definitely the 70s, 80s, but I like some of that silent movie stuff because some of that's pretty creepy.
And which is your favorite franchise of the horror movies?
Uh, I kind of like the Friday the 13th. You know, I
Me
like
too.
I just like, I don't know. I like how they just keep bringing him back. You know,
Yeah, they become some of the most interesting ways of how Jason kills people. Now, I'll say
yeah,
this that out of all the Friday the 13th movies, of course, the first one's the one I saw when I was a kid. I don't even know if I had any business watching it at the time, but I did. I had an aunt
yeah,
she was pretty interesting aunt. She read the most ridiculous movies, horror movies, and we just watch them. And I don't know if that explains a lot about my life afterwards, but that's a story for another day. But my favorite Friday the 13th, talk about the first one. I love 4. And I like number 6, Jason Lives. Because 4, we thought it was done when Tommy just killed Jason. And then, of course, 5 was like a fake Jason, somebody
yeah,
else pretending to be Jason. Then 6, Jason Lives. Man, now we got something. We got a zombie Jason running around.
yeah, yeah. I loved them all. Loved every one of them. And some of his kills are like great. Really creative.
Well, the one
I
that
love
stands out.
the body bag the body bag one.
That's the one. The body
Yeah.
bag, or was it the
Or the
sleeping bag in a
bag.
tree?
Yeah, the sleeping bag. Yeah, love that.
Yeah,
That's
that
like the
was.
best kill ever.
It was. It was just. That was like probably one of those painful ways to go.
Yeah, that would be horrible.
And then I know he went in space on Jason X, and that was pretty interesting too. I kind of like that too. Not a very popular opinion, but I think it was a fun movie to watch.
Yeah.
Even Jason Takes Manhattan. I like that. That was number 8, right? I think.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, they all start running into each other, but I'm a big
I
fan
like
of
him
Jason.
boxing the guy on the roof. Yeah.
Yeah,
Knocked
he
his
knocks
head
it,
off.
cleans his clock, literally. Not the block.
Yeah.
But no, so we're talking about, and it's called Josh's Horror Movie Vault, right? It's on YouTube.
Yes.
So now that you're working on some of this material, I know you're talking about doing the prequel to the Children on the Train. What type of other things you think you'll be making?
I'm actually working on another book. Like I've got all kinds of things in my head, especially at like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. I just start typing it out, and then I go through and start cleaning it up later. But this one is about one of those granny women, and it's one of those folklore fiction horrors, and it's like she's helping all these women have kids, and they already got like 7 or 8 kids, and food's real scarce, and these kids are dying, but they're just having these kids anyways, and she can't birth. So she gets really vengeful, and she's not the granny woman that's helping everybody anymore. So she starts stealing kids, girls, and she ends up stealing, 5 of them and gets caught, and they hang her, and she puts a curse on them, and it goes on.
Don't give too much. Yeah,
Yeah,
don't give too much away. I'm already on the hook for that one. And I mean, how
yeah.
far along? I mean, you're pretty much a quarter of the way through that. When do you think you'll have that book out?
I was talking to Thomas, and he said kind of wait around a little bit for the smoke off this one to die down a little bit. He said maybe about fall we might be able to drop another one. And I
That
told him, I
sounds
said, it gives me enough
good.
time to get these other 3, pretty much slicked out. Like I'm literally writing like 4 different ones. And I might work on it for a couple of days on one, and then it might go a day or 2, and I might not do anything, and then I'll bounce to another one. It's kind of hard to keep up with sometimes because I get so many things going through my head at once. But he's opened up a door for me, though, a creative door. I don't have wrestling no more, and I don't have tattooing anymore, so I got to have something. It's hard to do all that stuff anymore, and so.
No, I understand. Now you remind me of a friend of mine who writes a book, and then as soon as he's almost finished writing one book, he's got an idea for 3 other books, and then he starts writing stuff for
Yeah.
that. So the cycle never stops, and that's great, man. I think fall is a perfect season to have a book such as that. And now for the listeners of Let's Find Out, our friends that want to learn more about you, that want to learn more about your book Whispers in the Mountain, and then also your YouTube channel, where can they go find out?
Do what now? I'm sorry.
No, I think so. For those that want to learn more about you and what you do, your book and your channel, because I know YouTube, you have Josh's Horror Movie Vault, and
Yeah.
they can get the book through Zombie Media, right, on Amazon.
Yes, Amazon, and I think it's on Walmart.com too.
Excellent. And then if anybody has any questions about your books, your movie you're working on, and your future books, how can they contact you? Go straight to your YouTube through I'm sorry, through your
Yeah,
Facebook?
yeah, they can do it through Facebook. I have a page on there too, and it's under the same name. And
Oh,
I have do it on TikTok and just anywhere I can post it.
Yeah, you got to get it out there in all the socials. You know, TikTok's not one I do quite yet. I don't really understand it, but maybe
Yeah,
one day.
it's rough.
Yeah.
Gosh, they flag my videos so much. I have to about fight them to get them to even push it. And even then, they don't. Not much.
Yeah, I don't know how your stuff's getting flagged. As much nonsense as I know it's out there currently that should get flagged. I think you're the last person that should get flagged on that one. But we'll talk about that another day. And I'd like to invite you back later this year once the your new books come out, and maybe you'll have some reels come out too. Let's bring you back on the show. Let's talk about them, and that should be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I got those that 12-day 12 reels coming out now. For each story that's in my book. So I have these little mini 30-second, 30, 40-second trailers that I'm dropping for the next 12 days. Well, I'm on like number 4 now, so I got like 8 more days. And it's like a little hint of what each story is. So
It's like
hopefully that helps push
Christmas.
it too. Yeah.
12 days of Christmas, 12 days of horror with Curtis Josh Rogers.
Appalachian horror.
Absolutely, brother. And thank you for that. Let's bring you back later this year, and we'll talk about them.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you, my friend.
All right.
Copyright Diego the Podcaster. All content for Let's Find Out is the property of Diego the Podcaster and is served directly from our servers with no modification, redirects, or rehosting. All celebrity impersonators are paid performers. The impersonated celebrities do not endorse or promote any views or opinions expressed by our guests, Diego the Podcaster, or Let's Find Out. The information shared on Let's Find Out with Diego is provided on an as-is basis, with no guarantees of completeness, accuracy, usefulness, or timeliness.